So, we've got a political smackdown happening between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But don't worry, this isn't an actual boxing match, although that would be fun to watch. In a recent interview, Biden took a huge swing at Trump, saying, "What exactly is Trump doing with Russia? What kind of appeasement is this?" Apparently, Biden felt the need to call out Trump for what he calls modern-day appeasement. But let's be real, Trump doesn't have to work too hard. Just give Putin a few chunks of Ukraine and boom, the war is over. Let's see how this "who can appease more" showdown goes down. Trump. He's the king of unique decisions, and this one's no exception. When Biden accused him of appeasing Putin, Trump was all cool and collected, basically saying, well, if we give Putin a few pieces of Ukraine, things will settle down. He said, just give him the land, peace will come. Trump, totally confident, clearly believed Putin was just looking for a fancy new mansion in Ukraine after all the long, hard work of being president. Now come on, does anyone really think that Putin would be satisfied with just a few acres of land to call his own? This guy's ambitions go a bit beyond the real estate market. But hey, Trump seems to think Putin's goals are no bigger than just a little extra room to park his yacht. But truly, Trump is dead serious. He confidently defends his position by claiming that appeasement is a brilliant strategy to end the war and save lives. He says, you can't just keep fighting a nuclear power and hope they stop without giving them something, right? Biden, of course, took this as a major red flag. He said, Trump thinks that giving Putin land will stop the war. If that's the case, Putin is going to want more than just a few pieces of Ukraine. He's looking to build an empire. Now let's pause here for a second. The real question is, does Trump really think a few land concessions will stop Putin? Does he believe Putin is just chilling, waiting for some Ukrainian farmland to fulfill his wildest dreams? Trump went on about his strategic retreat approach. Basically, we give up a little and everyone gets to go home without losing face. Well, that sounds like an easy way to avoid a fight. But let's be honest, in Putin's world, a little bit of land is never enough. And if Trump keeps retreating, Putin might start demanding even more, like, say, Alaska. In Trump's view, appeasement is an art, a beautiful art, like painting a peaceful picture with one hand while giving away the world with the other. But here's the kicker. Putin, though, not that easy to please. Trump might think he's an art curator, but I think Putin's eyeing a whole gallery to expand his collection. Biden, being Biden, didn't just sit back and let Trump's artistic appeasement go unchallenged. He jumped straight into the ring with a counterpunch that would make even the most seasoned political debaters flinch. Biden was quick to point out that Trump was entirely out of touch with the reality of Putin's ambitions. Trump, Biden said, you think Putin will stop because we give him a few acres? Putin wants more than that. He's going for the empire. And Biden, of course, wasn't pulling any punches. He went on to argue that giving Putin anything would only encourage him to push for more. Classic move, give him an inch, and suddenly he's asking for the whole yard. Biden emphasized that Putin isn't just interested in some Ukrainian farmland. His endgame, according to Biden, is a full-blown empire, re-establishing the Soviet Union's old borders. And if the world lets him get away with Ukraine, what's stopping him from going after the Baltic states, or worse, parts of Eastern Europe? In Biden's mind, Trump's strategy was not just dangerous, but downright appeasing. And to Biden, that's a big no-no. You don't give a dictator what he wants and expect him to suddenly stop his conquest. Peace doesn't come from appeasement. It comes from standing firm, Biden explained, probably feeling like the kid in class who couldn't stand the slightly wrong answer. As Biden said, if we keep giving up ground, it's just going to embolden Putin. And next thing you know, we'll be watching Russian tanks roll into Poland, and we'll have to call that just a little friendly neighborhood expansion. But Biden didn't stop there. He went on to criticize Trump's entire outlook on foreign policy, which he said lacked the guts to deal with real threats. Trump thinks that appeasing Putin will bring peace. Well, good luck with that, Biden said, shaking his head. In Biden's mind, peace comes from showing strength and unity with allies, not from giving land away like some kind of political yard sale. But Trump wasn't backing down just yet. No, sir, he was preparing for round two. Trump wasn't just going to let Biden's weakling peacekeeper argument fly without a solid rebuttal. When Biden criticized him for wanting to appease Putin, Trump simply smirked and replied, "Biden's living in fantasy land. I know exactly how to get peace. You have to give a little to get a lot." Trump continued, "When you're dealing with a nuclear power like Russia, you can't just push them into a corner. That's not diplomacy. You have to meet them halfway, give them something they want, and make sure you still have enough in the tank to win the peace." Hold up. Was Trump seriously arguing that if we just let Putin take a few things, everything would be fine? That's like saying, sure, give your sibling your candy, but they'll totally stop stealing all of it after that. Trump's confidence was palpable, and he argued that his approach was a lot smarter than Biden's go hard or go home mentality. According to Trump, Biden's refusal to give in would just keep the conflict going, and the longer the war drags on, the more lives and resources are lost. Why keep fighting when you can strike a deal and move forward, Trump said. He went on to talk about how appeasement, in the right context, is a tool that works. Look, it's not about just giving things away, Trump continued. It's about recognizing the reality of the situation. If you make the right moves, the other side will stop pushing. It's all about knowing when to be tough and when to play nice. As Trump spoke, it was clear he believed his way was the only way forward. Forget the nuances, forget the risk of giving in to an expansionist agenda. Just make a deal and peacefully retreat, because why wouldn't that work? Biden wasn't just going to take Trump's response lying down. No, he was just getting started. You could practically feel the political heat from across the Atlantic as Biden fired back with a fury of sharp words, each aimed directly at Trump's appeasement philosophy. In his classic Biden style, he didn't just dismiss Trump's views, he eviscerated them. He started by pointing out that appeasing dictators is not only dangerous for Ukraine, but for the whole world. Trump thinks giving Putin a little land is going to stop him. Well, let me tell you something, folks. You give an inch to a dictator, and they take a mile. And then they ask for the rest of your country on top of it. Biden didn't mince words, clearly letting everyone in the room know that he was dead serious about this. Biden continued, practically shaking his head in disbelief. What's Trump's plan? Just give up all of Europe to Putin and call it a day. That'll solve everything, right? Sure, that's exactly what the world needs. More land for autocrats, more power for tyrants, and a world where democracy just keeps getting weaker. His voice became more animated as he went on. No, you don't appease autocrats. You stand firm. You fight for what's right, for what's fair, and you don't let anyone push you into the corner. The argument here was clear. Appeasement didn't work with Hitler, it didn't work with Stalin, and it sure as heck wasn't going to work with Putin. Biden didn't shy away from invoking the ghosts of history to make his point. He reminded the audience that the world had already tried appeasing aggressors before, and it didn't end well. Ask the people of Czechoslovakia. Ask the people of Poland. If you keep letting them take land, they'll just keep coming back for more. They always do. He went on to say that the world couldn't afford to let the likes of Putin get comfortable with territorial grabs. Biden made it abundantly clear that if Putin saw that the West was weak enough to give up a few pieces of land, he'd be emboldened. And once one dictator feels empowered, it's not just one country that suffers, it's the entire international order. That's when all of Europe, all of NATO, becomes vulnerable. But wait, Biden said, with a bit of a sarcastic laugh. Trump seems to think that by giving away land, you get peace. Well, sure, give Putin a little land, and next thing you know, he's going to want your entire backyard. Oh, and don't forget, he'll probably also demand your car, your best dishes, and maybe your dog too, just to keep the peace. Biden wasn't done there. He then turned his focus to what Trump was missing in this grand but completely flawed strategy. You can't just keep appeasing. You can't just keep giving up, Biden said, his voice rising with a little more passion. That's exactly how we end up with the kind of world where every tin pot dictator thinks they can just waltz in and take whatever they want, and America won't be able to stand up for freedom anymore. We'll be too busy apologizing for standing up in the first place. In typical Biden fashion, he also made sure to put the spotlight back on Trump's inability to get it when it comes to NATO. He criticized Trump for undermining the unity of NATO and the collective defense agreements that have kept Europe safe for decades. Biden made it clear that if the West did start to back down in the face of Russia's aggression, it wouldn't just be Ukraine that was at risk, it would be the whole damn continent. Look, I get it, Biden continued, with a knowing look at the camera. Trump's always been about making deals, but this isn't a real estate transaction. This is about protecting our freedom, our values, and making sure that Putin doesn't just waltz in and take whatever he wants because he feels like it. The problem with Trump's strategy is that it's built on fantasy. You can't negotiate with a man who doesn't respect boundaries. You have to draw the line. The message from Biden was clear and unmistakable. Appeasement simply does not work, especially not when the world is facing an adversary like Putin. To Biden, peace cannot be achieved by allowing one nation to expand its power unchecked. You don't just give them a piece of land and hope everything magically turns out fine. That's how empires grow. That's how wars start. As if to put the cherry on top, Biden concluded his argument with a statement that was as biting as it was clear. If you think that appeasing Putin will make everything better, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you. And no, Trump, I'm not making any deals on this one. As Biden and Trump's verbal sparring continued, the world couldn't help but tune in. For those watching the political clash between these two titans, it wasn't just about whether Biden or Trump had the better argument. It was about the broader implications for the future of global politics. Could Trump's brand of appeasement work? Was Biden being too aggressive? What were the real-world consequences of this debate? Across the Atlantic, NATO leaders, particularly those in Eastern Europe, were growing increasingly concerned. They could see the writing on the wall. Trump's approach to appeasing Putin could very well have disastrous consequences for the alliance. Countries like Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia were all too aware of the dangers of appeasement. They'd lived through Soviet occupation, and they weren't about to let it happen again. For them, every concession to Putin was a step closer to a nightmare they just barely escaped. In fact, these countries were some of the first to publicly reject Trump's approach. They were the first line of defense against Russian aggression. and the thought of letting Putin slowly chip away at Ukraine was a terrifying prospect. For these nations, every piece of land that Ukraine might concede was another step towards Russia's long-term goals. Even Western European leaders, like German Chancellor Angela Merkel, couldn't help but express their skepticism about Trump's policy. The idea that appeasing Putin could lead to a long-lasting peace was dangerous in their eyes. The world had already tried appeasing dictators before, and the results had been catastrophic. Merkel's warning echoed Biden's sentiments. Appeasement doesn't bring peace, it invites more aggression. And it wasn't just the European powers who were concerned. China, which had been eyeing Russia's moves with growing interest, was also keeping a close watch. If Putin successfully expanded Russia's territory through appeasement, what would that mean for China's own territorial ambitions in the South China Sea or Taiwan? What kind of precedent would this set for the global order? The world seemed to be split into two camps: those who believed that standing firm against Putin was the only way forward, and those who thought Trump's deal-making approach could end the war more swiftly. But as the debate raged on, one thing was clear. The international community was deeply divided over the future of global diplomacy. In the end, the question wasn't just about whether Biden or Trump had the better argument. It was about the future of America's role on the world stage. Was Trump right? Could appeasement really be the key to peace? Or was Biden's hardline approach the only thing that would protect democracy and freedom? As the dust settles, it's clear that the future of U.S. foreign policy is at a crossroads. Will America continue to stand firm against Russia's expansionism, or will it give in to the siren call of peace through concession? Biden firmly believes that appeasing Putin is not only dangerous for Ukraine, but for the entire international order. He's committed to ensuring that NATO remains united, that Russia is held accountable for its aggression, and that the free world doesn't give in to a dictator. But Trump, with his unique brand of diplomacy, argues that sometimes peace can only be achieved by giving a little ground to avoid a greater conflict. So, what's the solution? Should the world give Putin a few more inches of land, hoping he'll stop there, or should the West stand firm, risking a prolonged conflict to protect the values that have kept the global order intact for decades? One thing's for sure: the next few years will be critical in determining whether we learn from history or repeat its mistakes. And in the meantime, we'll be watching, popcorn in hand, as the world's two most colorful political figures continue to spar it out in the most unexpected of arenas, the global stage. So, which side are you on? Apologies and appeasement, or a steadfast stand for democracy? The debate rages on.